Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, all praises, honor, and glory be unto Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakat Kodash. Double honors to our apostles and elders at Great Millstone who taught us His truth and who rule well, peace and love, save, taste, and mercy. Be unto you, Akim, that are hazarding your lives to push His truth, to magnify and praise the names of Yahweh and Yahweh Shai, to edify and uplift the body, all right, the house of David, the elect, to herald in the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahweh Shai, who's coming back to bring the kingdom for Himself and the kingdom for the elect of the nation of Israel. And those of you that are prophesying these prophecies, all right, peace be unto you and shalom. To the rest of you believers, you Akim and Fiakwatim that believe in Yahweh Ba'ashmi Yahweh Shai with your whole heart, mind, body, and spirit, that are waiting for Yahweh Shai to return and for these last and final prophecies to happen in the earth, a peace be unto you and shalom. The world is not ready for what's getting ready to happen. All right, this transition, all right, with the monetary system, the economy around the world, and the Great Reset, you know, and the elites that are spearheading this thing, they know that the result of these drastic changes that they're getting ready to make is going to lead to a lot of people dying. And really, it's Yahweh Ba'ashmi Yahweh Shai that's working on their minds and have been working on their minds all the way up until this point to bring these certain things to pass that has led to this point. When you go into the book of Proverbs, it tells you in the book of Proverbs, the 21st chapter, in verse 1, the king's heart is in the hands of Yahweh, and as the rivers of water, He turneth it whithersoever He will. And when you look up the word turneth, the word there is natah, and it means to stretch out, extend, spread out, pitch, turn, pervert, incline, bend, bow. All right, to turn, incline, influence. All right, bend down, hold out, extend, thrust aside, thrust away. So it's Yahweh Ba'ashmi Yahweh Shai that is in control of these powers that are ruling over the earth. He's in control of the rich elite banking families. He make them do His bidding. In the scripture that you can follow that particular scripture with, going to the book of Daniel, the 10th chapter, in the 13th verse, it says, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me in 120 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remembered there and I remained there with the king of Persia." So this was Yahweh Shai who was working on the mind, you know, of the king of Persia at that time. It was Cyrus, basically to do his bidding. And that's the reason why you can go to other scriptures and it says Cyrus my anointed. Now that doesn't mean that Yahweh Ba'ashmi Yahweh Shai made a special exception for this particular heathen to the point where He favored him above, you know, others. You know, and there's another scripture that says that I have roughly, you know, just paraphrasing it. It says, I have, you know, basically worked with you, although you have not known me. So that doesn't mean that He accepted him, you know, that He chose him to, you know, be a special exception of the heathen to be accepted amongst Yahweh's people. No, what that means is He chose him for a particular purpose. Just like in these days today, He has chosen the rich elite banking families that are ruling over the earth for a specific purpose. And their purpose and their bidding that is given them of Yahweh Ba'ashmi Yahweh Shai is to bring forth this MOTB. So what has to happen is there has to be a change. And it's called the Great Reset It's called the NWO, you know, and I'm sure that there's other names, you know, that they give it in secret. But when this happens, it's going to lead to the demise and the death of a lot of people. It's going to lead to famine. It's going to lead to economic instability, because what has to happen first is the dollar has to crash. And it's not looking too good right now. All right, the dollar is performing horribly. All right, and this is currency that was used as the world reserve currency, which the way that was set up, it was done through wickedness. All right, there had to have been a lot of stealing and a lot of ripping off in order for that to happen from the beginning. And the beginning of that, it really starts before 1944. All right, it starts going back, because since these particular people that are ruling over, all right, the Red Shield people, since they begin to come into power, you know, through their banking practices, they have always used schemes and things to get their advantage. But this is all through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. Now, going from here, the Bretton Woods agreements, because in this lesson, I'm going to go through the 3 different stages. You have the Bretton Woods Agreement. You have what economists call Bretton Woods 2.0. And then you have what certain economists call Bretton Woods 3.0. And you will find out in this lesson what is the difference between them, and also how you'll be able to identify them and explain them yourselves. Now, the Bretton Woods Agreement, which began in 1944, saw the birth of 2 entities, which was the World Bank as well as the IMF. You know, the IMF is known as the International Monetary Fund, but beginning with the World Bank. What the World Bank did was they loaned money to countries to help rebuild after World War II, which you have to call into question, why are these wars fought anyways? What is the reason that all of these wars are fought? And there's a quote, I want to give this to Apostle Tahar for saying this, or being the first one that said this, but all wars are bankers' wars. All right, all wars are bankers' wars. So keep that in mind. It acts as an organization that attempts to fight poverty, offering developmental assistance to middle and poor countries. All right, so keep that in mind as well, because really there's no such thing as impoverished countries or third world countries. Third world countries are really made. When you think about it, these are countries that are extremely potent when it comes down to certain commodities, when it comes down to certain resources. All right, they are rich in resources. So how can a country that is naturally rich in resources have impoverished people that live there? How? How can you be poor within a country that produces everything that you need? Those countries are made poor. They're robbed of their resources. They're put in situations where they have to get in bed with the World Bank and the IMF, and it causes them to go further into debt, and a debt in which the interest that they're charged, they can never afford to pay back. So really, there's no such thing as a poor country. All right. Most impoverished countries are rich in resources, commodities that are used around the world. Their resources are robbed from them by the rich. That's the reason why you can go to scriptures like Isaiah 10 and 13, which says, "For he saith, by the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I am prudent, and I have removed the bounds of the people, and have robbed their treasures, and I have put down the inhabitants like a valiant man." Now, who is it speaking of? You know, at a particular time, this did apply to the king of Assyria, but modern day Assyria, which is a spiritual name for America besides the name Babylon. All right, America is spiritually known as Nineveh or Syria as well. because it carries the same attributes of that place. America is also spiritually known as Egypt. So this applies to America within these times. This is a prophetic statement concerning the elites that are ruling through America. They have removed the bounds of the people. The bounds are the landmarks. When you remove a nation's landmarks, you're robbing them of their land. Therefore, you're robbing them of the resources that grow from their land. Now, there's different ways that the people that rule through this country do it. They can do it by physically warring against you, or they can do it through their wicked practices. And in most cases, to avoid, bloodshed, all right, and also to receive a negative name or shame, they'll do it through their wicked practices. So you have removed the bounds of the people, and you have spoiled them of their goods and their resources. Reading on, it says, "In my hand have found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathereth the eggs that are left, I have gathered all the earth, and there was none that moved the wing or opened the mouth or peep." And when you go into the blessing of Esau, how did it say that Esau will come into power? Go into the book of Genesis. This is the book of Genesis, the 27th chapter, and beginning at verse 37. "And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing? My father, bless me, even also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept." And the scripture tells you that he didn't receive any repentance, although he sought it carefully with tears. "And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above." So Esau was eventually going to rule over the earth. All right, he was going to have the fatness of the earth and the dew from heaven above. But the way that he was going to get it, "And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck." So what is dominion? Or rather, what is the word there within the Hebrew? The word there is rawad, and it means to wander restlessly. All right, to be restless, to show restless. And this is the same thing that it says about Cain. All right, that he will be a vagabond and a fugitive in the earth. All right, a fugitive and a vagabond, which shows you that Esau was Cain in the reincarnation, and that his seed were the children of Cain within the reincarnation. Genesis 4:12. "When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth." So a fugitive is someone that flees justice, and that's this man. All right, he's someone that flees justice, but he's also restless. All right, he always is wandering somewhere into someone else's land, into someone else's dwelling place, robbing them and taking their resources for them, or trying to overthrow their government and make it belong to himself. And that's the reason why the IMF was set up. And that's the reason why the World Bank was set up. And this is the reason that the Bretton Woods Agreement was established from the beginning, so that you can rob countries. This was your way of subjugating them. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is a United Nations specialized agency created to secure international monetary cooperation and to expand international liquidity, which is access to hard currencies. Now, when you look up the word secure, because I found it interesting that they will put the word secure there, all right? So we're going to define the word secure through Google, And what does it mean? A fix or fasten so as not to give way, become loose, or be lost. All right, fix or attach something firmly so that it cannot be moved or lost. So basically what they were fixing through this is their control over the finances, over the currency. And Esau likes to play around with words. See, he tries to make it seem as if he's doing something for your betterment, but all the while it's to undermine you. So speaking of the IMF, it was also created to bring so-called financial stability following World War II. After World War II, you had European nations that were so devastated from, the war that had happened within their region, within their zones. And America was untouched by that war, although at a particular time they got into that war. They were untouched, they were unscathed. All right, their economy wasn't messed up like all of these other nations that were destroyed and that were put in a bad spot, because the infrastructure, of their country, and their cities and towns were destroyed. So what they needed was money to rebuild things back. And what you will come to realize is that when it comes down to, these wars that are fought, they're fought purposely to bankrupt countries, to put them in debt so that they have no other choice but to get involved with the World Bank, or with the IMF. Now, speaking of the IMF as well, it says member states pay by quota subscription, which means that they pay according to the size of their country. So the way that they pay is they give resources, all right? So the maximum amount of resources the members is obligated to provide to the IMF is according to the size of their country. When member countries experience trouble, they can get advice or financial assistance from the IMF. But when you do this, you're basically, and excuse my language, you're fucking yourself. All right? Because now you're already broke, you're already in debt. All right, your GDP isn't high. All right, your country is ravished, or whatever the hell happened. So you can't afford to pay back what you have borrowed anyway. So you're constantly being sucked dry by these vampires. The purpose of the IMF was to create a system which avoided World War III and the Great Depression too, which World War III is going to happen anyway, and there's something coming that's going to be far greater, far worse than the Great Depression. Now, as a side note, to speak about the Great Depression, basically people were starving to death, and a lot of these people were Jakes. All right, you had everybody that was affected, but the main ones that were affected were Jake, because you got to remember that Jake wasn't rich at this time, or there was no Floyd Mayweathers, there were no Kanye West or Jay-Z's, a small percentage of Jakes that had enough money to be able to have their own land and have their own swaths of land with animals and things that they can grow. So the majority of Jakes were working for people. They were doing minimum, and when I say minimum, bare minimum income-based jobs where they were getting paid shitty already. And those particular jobs were being taken from them, all right, because they were saying that it was better or more needed, which there's another word that I'm looking for. But even the most ridiculous or low-level jobs that Jake had were being taken away from them and given to whites. At this time, during the Great Depression, it was hard to find work even for Edomites. So how much more so for Jakes that were already being oppressed, that were already struggling. So the majority of people that were dying, which it wasn't being reported, were of Israelites. So reading a little bit about the Great Depression. It says by the end of 1932, the Great Depression had affected some 60 million people, most of whom wealthier Americans perceive as the deserving poor. All right, the deserving poor, which were Jakes. Yet at the time, federal efforts to help those in need were extremely limited, and national charities had neither the capacity nor the will to elicit the large-scale response required to address the problem. The American Red Cross did exist, but Chairman John Barton Payne contended that unemployment was not an act of God, but rather an act of man, and therefore refused to get involved in widespread direct relief efforts. So basically, he was saying that this isn't an act of Yahweh. This is in which they don't use the name Yahweh. I'm using that because I don't want to use God. He was saying that this wasn't an act of Yahweh, that it was an act of man. But when you go into scriptures like the book of Sirach 11 and 14, it says prosperity and adversity, life and death, poverty and riches come of Yahweh. So this was an act of Yahweh. And just like, the change within this economic system of the world is of Yahweh, although he's using men to do it to bring about his purpose. Now, jumping down, because not only did you have the Great Depression, all right, which began when the stock market collapsed in 1929, you also had following what is known as an environmental catastrophe. All right, I'm sorry. It says environmental catastrophe meets economic hardship, which was the Dust Bowl. All right, so you had the Dust Bowl. And it says concerning the Dust Bowl, despite the widely held relief that rural Americans suffered less in the Great Depression due to the ability to at least grow their own food. This was not the case. Our farmers, ranchers, and families suffered more than any group other than African Americans during the Depression, in which the African Americans, the true nationality of them is Judah. They're the tribe of Judah. But they're called today African Americans, or they're called Negroes, or they're called colored. But really, they're the Judites of the Bible from the 12 tribes of Israel. So there was no one that suffered in the Great Depression worse than Israelites. All right, Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and the rest of the Israelites that were over here, although they only mention, Judah within this article. Now you have farmers that were suffering because what Esau was doing was, he was working the land so much that he didn't give the land a break. He didn't give the land a Sabbath, a rest. And on top of that, these lands are stolen lands anyway. And the scripture says, when you go to the book of Job 31 and 39, it says, if I have eaten our fruits thereof without money, and have caused the owners thereof to lose their life, all right, let thistles grow instead of wheat, and cockles instead of barley. The words of Job are ended. So what they did was they stole this land. They caused the lives of those that own the land to be taken away from them. And they're doing the same thing in the world today and around the world unto other nations. But you're going to be paid back because of what you have done unto the Israelites. When you go into the book of Micah 2 and 1, it says, woe to them that devise iniquity, that work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his own heritage. So you took away these lands by violence, and everything that you own and have in the world, you have taken it away through violence. Now going back and going to the book of Leviticus, the 25th chapter, verse 3, it says, 6 years thou shalt sow the field, and 6 years thou shalt prune the vine, and gather the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for Yahweh. Thou shalt neither sow the field nor prune the vine. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt reap. Neither the grapes of the vine, Salakia, neither gather the grapes of the vine undressed, for it is the year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, and for thy servants, and for thy maids, and for thy hired servants, and for thy strangers that sojourn with thee. So it was Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai that was judging them. All right, it was Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai that caused, that dust bowl to happen. All right, along with the one of the greatest, financial collapses that ever happened, all right, upon the planet Earth, which was the collapse of the stock market. Now going back, to deal with the IMF, because when you get in bed with the IMF and the World Bank, all right, you put yourself in a debt that you can never afford to get out of. So these countries, that get involved with the IMF, they have to give the IMF their resources. They have to give them the things that they would naturally use to give to, the poor people of their land, that they can give to a welfare state, or they can use themselves. So this is a way of Esau coming in and robbing you of the things that belong unto you inherently. Now the scriptures say in the book of Proverbs 22:7, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. All right. So this isn't nothing but a scheme to take the resources that belong into a country. Now going from here to the book of Sirach 20:14, it says, the gift of a fool shall do thee no good when thou hast it, neither yet of the envious for his necessities, for he looketh to receive many things for one. And this is what they do. When you borrow money from them through the International Monetary Fund, all right, or through the World Bank, they look to receive, 10 times or 20 times more than the light or small gift that they gave unto you. But they feel justified, charging you, interest for the things that they give you, because remember that the rich elite banking families of the world, which are the small hats, they feel as if that they're the chosen people. And when you go into the law of Deuteronomy 23:19, it says, thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of the things that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that Yahweh thy power may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it. So they feel as if they're justified for doing it. And you know what? They probably don't even think like that, just to, put that out there. But showing you that really you're not supposed to lend upon usury to an Israelite, but into someone of another nation, you can do it, which means to lend with interest. But the interest that they lend in is so exorbitant that these countries would never be able to pay back. So when it comes down to the IMF, so far you have 190 countries that are a part of the IMF. All right. And there's 195 countries in the world today, according to what they say. I'm sure that there's probably more. There's other countries that they probably don't recognize as being countries. Now, there's 193 countries that are a part of the UN, which is the United Nations, and 2 non-member observing states, which is the Holy See, which is Rome, and the state of Palestine, which is Israel. Now, the reason of me mentioning this is because, remember, the creation of the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 saw the creation of the IMF and the World Bank. So what currency do you think that they're using? All right, when the IMF gives gifts, unto other nations, or when they loan unto other nations. I shouldn't even call it gifts. When they loan it to other nations, they're using the American dollar, because ultimately, under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the American currency was pegged, all right, or the American dollar was pegged to gold, at the promise that each ounce of gold will be the amount of $35, which eventually they had to separate the gold from the American dollar, which was done by Nixon when you go into the 1970s, all right, because America was printing too much money than what they had in gold reserves. But before we get there, this shows you that America is Babylon the whore within scriptures. All right, Babylon the whore within scriptures. You had all of these nations that sent their gold here, because their economies were doing so bad and they were looking for stability, that this was the only thing that seemed right at the time, which was all set up through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Because once they receive these nations' gold, these nations in return receive, the American currency or the American dollar. So now their economies were fixed to the American dollar. But eventually, what the world would experience would be that they would be robbed of their gold, and now they're left with all of these dollars in reserve, and what to do with them. They had no other choice but to continuously use them, which saw the birth or gave way to the birth of Bretton Woods 2.0, which is the petrodollar, which I'm going to explain that in a minute. But under the Bretton Woods Agreement of July 1944, all right, Nixon, which is Richard Nixon, canceled it. All right. But under the Bretton Woods Agreement, it required currencies pegged to the US dollar at the rate of $35 per ounce. All right. And the reason they did this, or supposedly, was to ensure economic stability and political peace. All right. States agreed, or countries agreed, to cooperate to closely regulate the production of their currency to maintain fixed exchange rates between countries, with the aim of more easily facilitating international trade. So after these nations were robbed of their gold, which you had Great Britain and France, they saw that basically there were inflationary practices that were being done by those that were ruling through America, or through the economy of America, because they were just printing money, more money than they had within gold reserves. So they went to collect on their gold, and that's when that standard was stripped in the 1970s. So it says the collapse in 1970s inflationary monetary policy that was inappropriate for the key currency country of the system, which was America, printing excessive amounts of money they didn't have. The United States controlled 2/3 of the world's gold. That's a lot of gold. All right. Every time I see the word 2/3, it reminds me of, Zechariah, the 13th chapter. But Israel is as the sands of the sea. They're without number. So if a innumerable multitude in 144,000 will be saved, and them together are equated to 1/3. All right, 2/3 is a lot. That's basically saying that they had, 75%, and excuse my math, if it's wrong, but I'll say 75% of the world's gold, or 66.6% of the world's gold. Let's say it that way. Not 75%, but 66.6% of the world's gold. Which is crazy. So basically, them holding their gold as collateral, all right, or in another word, holding their gold hostage. These nations had no other choice but to play along or dance to the tune of those that were ruling over through America. So they had no choice but to follow their policies and their practices. Reading on, it says the decision to suspend gold convertibly by President Nixon on August 15, 1971 was triggered by the French and British intentions to convert dollars into gold in early August. The U.S. decision to suspend gold convertibly ended a key aspect of the Bretton Woods system. The remaining part of the system, the adjustable peg, disappeared by March 1973, and that was the American dollar being pegged into the gold. It collapsed, but created a lasting influence on international currency exchange and trade through its developments of the IMF and World Bank. So what it did was it gave birth to the Bretton Woods 2.0. Now, under the Bretton Woods 2.0, all of these nations still had the American dollar in reserve. So now they had no choice but to use that, because at the time, this was the greatest, the American dollar had the most stability at the time. All right, and it was the best thing to use for treasuries, and savings. So eventually you saw the dollar bill being pegged to oil, giving way to the petrodollar. So now, in order for these nations to buy and sell and trade oil around the world, they would need to use those American dollars that they had in reserve. So this is the Bretton Woods 2.0, or that was the Bretton Woods 2.0. So the Bretton Woods 2.0 is the petrodollar system. And once again, the whole way that this is going on, because now nations would send their goods to America, to be bought. They would, these merchant countries, so that they can get these dollars, so that they can hold those dollars in reserve, so that they can buy oil, which is needed for the economy. And not just for the purpose of moving vehicles or going within engines. All right, they need gas in order to heat, their country, in order to have hot water, in order to take hot showers. They need gas, to power vehicles, to power other machinery. They need oil to make foam or plastic, and other things that they can use, for shipping goods and making even more money. And using for other purposes, whether they're using it in the hospital or within grocery store, within convenience stores. Whether it's something that go on an automobile, whether it's something that's used on a light post, on a trash can, whatever, so that they can keep their gross domestic product high, so that they can continuously make money, so that they can become wealthy. So in doing so, they accepted the policies and the practices and all of the things that are within the wine of the cup of the whore, in order to keep being in bed with her, so that sanctions isn't put on them, so that they can't trade. And this is how you know that America is that whore, when you read Revelation the 17th chapter or Revelation the 18th chapter. So reading about the Bretton Woods 2.0, which is the petrodollar system, dominance of the United States and the global order brought with it trust in the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, and the U.S. treasuries, the greatest saving assets in the world at that time. So there was no other country in the world, whose currency was as strong as the American dollar. So nations naturally gravitated to it to use it. And in using that, remember, their gold was taken away from them. They were left with these dollars in reserve. America eventually entered into an agreement with Saudi Arabia to peg the dollar to oil, giving birth to the petrodollar. So now these nations had no choice. They had no choice. Now, eventually, what you saw right after the collapse of the gold standard, all right, which happened in 1971, you had the system that came online, which was known as a SWIFT system, which SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide International Interbank Salakia, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. So it was a messenger system that allowed one country or a person that was purchasing something in one country using the American dollar to message to another person in another country without actual having to ship boatloads of money to say that, this amount of money is being credited within this system. So that gave birth to a new way of buying and selling and trading. But if you did not comply, with the standards of this whore, then basically you would be shut off from a system like that, or you would be sanctioned. You would be have tariffs put on you to where you couldn't trade and countries couldn't trade with you. So basically, this is a way of checking nations, all right, keeping them in check. So SWIFT was founded in Brussels on the 3rd of May, 1973, which is very ironic. How in the hell did this system just come online 2 years after this major situation that happened with the gold? To me, that it sounds as if they had it all set up to be like that to begin with. All right, under the leadership of the inaugural CEO, Karl Ruderskold, and was supported by 239 banks in 15 countries. And right now is way more than that. So this SWIFT system became very important to trade. And that's the reason that I'm bringing this up. Because now you would use this system to send, use those American dollars, all right, that you had in reserve to be able to buy and trade with. Now, 79% of international purchases are done in dollars. And this is according to, certain economists. So 79% of international purchases are done in dollars. All right, 79% of international purchases are done in dollars. That's a lot. That is a lot. So if they're done in dollars, that means that you would need to be in bed with the whore in order to get those dollars so that you can buy, so that you can sell, so that you can trade. So if you did anything to offend them and they shut you off from that system, or they set off your SWIFT system the way that they did Russia, then that means that you won't be able to buy or sell or trade using the American dollars. And 79% of internations purchases are done through dollars. That means that countries are using, outside of the America, are using the dollar for buying, for selling, for trading. So with that being said, is by them shutting off a major country like Russia from SWIFT, that's giving birth, or has given birth, to Bretton Woods 3.0. So what you're getting ready to see is a great reset. You're getting ready to see an economic reset to the point where the American dollar is done away with. It's going to lose value. It's going to grow weaker. People around and nations around the world are going to lose trust and interest in using it. You already have something known as BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, in which they're creating their own SWIFT accounts, in which they're trading with their own currencies, which is devaluing and weakening the American dollar. So the petrodollar is ending, and you're about to see the birth of a one world central bank, which will issue, all right, the currency that people can spend. And that currency is going to be a digital currency. It's not going to be a hard currency. All right, it's not going to be a currency that's spendable like the dollar, where it's paper, or the coinage is silver. It's going to be something that is done through a computer through zeros and ones. But in order to spend and use that currency, you're going to need to have a digital wallet. And that digital wallet will be the CHIP. All right, it will be the RFID CHIP. All right, it will be the grain of rice. It will be rather put in your hand or put in your head. And you won't be able to buy or sell without it. So a one more central bank, which will be created, all right, will create a central bank digital currency. So that CBDC will be the new currency, and it's not just going to be used here in America, it's going to be used all around the world. And that's the reason why it says, when you go into the book of Revelation, the 3rd chapter, and the 10th verse, it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Because when this happens, you got to think about it. All right, people are going to starve because they don't have the ability to buy and sell once this dollar collapses, because that's what they're doing. They're purposely collapsing the dollar, but it's all through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashmi Yahushai. Why? Because they want that old system, which is a system that doesn't do anything but accumulate debt on top of debt. When you go into scriptures like the book of Habakkuk, or Salakia, the book of Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, in verse 6, it says, shall not all these take up a parable against thee, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth in that which is not his? How long to him that ladeth himself with thick clay? Yeah, because this system that is set up, all right, in which they have the world using a currency or the dollar that's not backed by anything. All right, it's backed by petrol, and that's about it. But every time, because this money could just be printed out of nowhere, every time you spend $1, you generate debt on top of debt. So when you go into the word for thick clay, the word there is aibatya, and it says heavy debt. So there's nothing but debt on top of debt. So they want to reset the economic system and do away with their old system and create a new system. And that will be the MOTB system. Now, under that one world central bank in the CBDC, you're going to have taxations. All right. There's no way that you'll be able to avoid paying taxes. If they feel as if they want to charge you more in taxes because of a certain particular thing or whatever that's going on, they're going to charge you more. You won't be able to avoid and not pay it. All right, they're going to implement, just like what China have, a social credit system in which they're going to penalize people for being negative or being bad. If you spoke out or if you said something against a government or an official, you know, if you're rebellious, then basically your social credit score will be low, which means that you won't be able to travel. You won't be able to buy a plane ticket. You won't be able to buy a train ticket. You won't be able to ride a bus. You won't be able to buy a car. You won't be able to rent a car. You won't be able to have access to certain parts of the city. You won't be able to shop in certain places. People won't deal with you. All right, you will have statuses based upon social credit scores. All right, a woman won't deal with you. Oh, you got a low social credit score. I ain't dealing with you. But you will also see the introduction of things like UBI, which is universal basic incomes. All right, to the point where people may be interested. Yeah, I take it because and this is, and I'm speaking as somebody else may speak, being intrigued or alert by a such thing as an MOTB. They'll say, yeah, I'll take it because they're giving me a credit of $3,500 each month on here, to the point where you don't really have to work, but basically because they're giving you free money, people will take it. You also see the end of privacy, all right, because you won't have no more privacy. All of your thoughts, all of your purchases, who you communicate with, all of those things will be collected as data and will be held as data and also will be used against you. You also see the end of liberty. So there won't be any more liberty. All right, you won't be able to travel as you will. You won't be able to go places as you would. You won't be able to speak as you would. If they say you got to stay in your house, you got to stay in your house. So this is Revelation 13 and 16. And he calls of all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of men, and his number is 666. All right, so this is speaking of the MOTB system that is being set up through the Bretton Woods 3.0. All right, now I have an article real fast that I'm gonna pull up, or rather, something that I'm gonna read, which just comes from a PDF, and it comes from a man whose name is Zoltan. What is his name? Zoltan Pozsar. And this is about Bretton Woods 3. It says, we are witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3, a new world monetary order centered around commodity-based currencies in the East that will likely weaken the euro-dollar system and also contribute to inflationary forces in the West. And what are we seeing? We're seeing inflationary forces in the West. So the price of goods are growing astronomical. And why they're growing is not because the goods are bad. It's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because the American dollar is weakening. All right, that's the reason why. But instead of a commodity-based currency, because they're thinking what BRICS is thinking, or what Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa is thinking. They're thinking that theirs is going to be the next currencies that the world trade with. No, it's going to be the MOTB system. So you're going to see a system that's not based off of commodities. It's going to be based off of the rulers that are ruling over the rich elite banking families, and what they say through their system, through their digital system, what money is and how you use it. It's not going to be fixed by commodities, but right now it seems as if it's that way. Which commodities are things like wheat. It's things like oil. It's things like gold. Silver. All right, fruits, vegetables, whatever. It says a crisis is unfolding, a crisis of commodities. Commodities are collateral, and collateral is money. Just like that gold during the Bretton Woods Agreement was used as collateral, the same thing is done with these assets or the things of these other nations like Russia. All right, what you've seen are these particular things being taken away from them by force. Reading on, it says, in this crisis is about the rising allure of outside money over inside money. Bretton Woods 2 was built on inside money, and its foundation crumbled a week ago when the G7 seized Russia's foreign exchange reserves. So there you go. The beautiful paradox of linear rates, the stuff you trade and that I write about, is that you need to think linear, all right, to find relative value most of the time. But you have to think non-linear to recognize and survive regime shifts. We are seeing a regime shift unfold in funding markets currently, which as always will pass in a sea change in inflation dynamics and foreign exchange reserves management practices. We have two convictions today. First, the June FRA OIS All right, spreads can widen more, at least 50 BPSs. Let me see if there's anything else that's in here. But that was pretty much it. There's a lot to be read in here, and I'll put something in the description box that will lead back to this article. But the point was the fact that he mentioned Bretton Woods 3, a new world monetary order centered around commodity-based currencies. And there's something else that I was looking at that also mentioned the birth of a CBDC. And let me see if I can find it in here. See if it's in here. No, it's not in here. So it was something else that I was looking at, that I was intended to bring out. Something that had tied both of the situations together. So what we're about to see is a new economic change. All right, and that economic change is going to entail the MOTB system being set up. And this is what some economists call the Bretton Woods 3.0. All right, so under the Bretton Woods 3.0, it's not going to be, income that's tangible. All right, that you can handle in your hand, that you can use. All right, it's going to be something that's put inside of your hand. All right, that you can swipe your hand to pay for with. All right, or as well as your forehead. So I just want to look something up real fast. If I can find it, bear with me. All right, I think I found it. It says right here, it says that has the U.S. Federal Reserve thinking about backing its own digital version of cash. A Fed-backed digital currency would in theory function like cash without delays, processing fees, and onboarding requirements, and could usher unbanked and underbanked Americans into the digital economy. So unbanked, which means that you don't have a bank, or underbanked Americans. All right, so you have a lot of Americans that don't have a bank account. You have a lot of people around the world that don't have a bank account. You have a lot of people around the world that don't even own a cell phone. So how would they be involved within this inclusive system? It will have to be that they receive a special thing inside of their hand or in their forehead. Reading on, it says Americans into the digital economy. Citizens could send cash digitally to one another or swipe a government debit card to pay. And that money will live in a Fed-back wallet outside of a private banking system, which they're not going to use a card system, because when you think of it, basically what they're doing is, when you look at all of these machines that are being set up within these places where you can buy and sell and trade, they have something called wireless or touchless payment methods. So why are they setting up these touchless payment methods? That's because when they set up this new system, you're not going to use the old system, or the old methods of payments. You're not going to swipe, or you're not going to use cash on hand. You're going to just touch. You're gonna swipe, but it's going to be the swipe of the hand, not of a credit card. All right. So when I say swipe, which majority of credit cards have chips in them. All right. Majority of debit cards have chips in them now. And when you notice, you don't even have to, swipe the card anymore. You just touch the card on the machine, or you put the card near the machine, and it takes your money off of it. So you don't have to swipe the card physically. Reading on, it says, building central bank digital currency, CBDC, carries risk for failure, hacking, or breaches of personal privacies. But if the Fed can bring a digital dollar online, it can make the digital economy much quicker, more efficient, and more accessible to those who need it most, which we don't need this shit. All right, really, we can have a bartering system, and we can buy, sell, and trade amongst each other, you know, and using, you know, if you have chickens, you know, and I have corn and you want corn and I need chickens, we can trade with each other. So really, that way of life, that simplicity or simple way of life was taken away by Esau Edom. All right? Using gold and silver was taken away by this man, all to come to this, because what he wants to do is enslave the world. So reading on, it says the digital divide is growing right now. The U.S. digital payment system relies heavily on the private sector. This has its downsides. Interest rates can hit hard if balances are not paid off. The average U.S. credit card balance was about $5,900 at the end of 2020. Banks charge overdraft fee if a person takes out more money for a checking account than they have. And while some apps like Venmo and Zelle allow people to easily transfer money between one another digitally, they are still largely linked to bank accounts with multi-day processing delays or fees for interest. What is missing, says digital currency advocates, is a public option free of fees, delays, and hassle. So this is one of their selling points. This is how they're gonna sell it to you. All right. There's another article as well, I believe, that goes into it. It's Salakia Baba Kashai. You know, this website is taking forever to load up. All right, that's the Prince of the Power of the Air. But anyway, this one was going into the IMF. And I believe it mentioned something about starting a new economy. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I really hope that this lesson was edifying. You know, Salakia, you know, if it seemed like I was rambling a little bit, you know, but the Spirit hopped on me to really go into this, you know, to really break down the different stages, you know, of you know, from the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 to what economists call Bretton Woods 2.0 and also Bretton Woods 3.0. All right, but we're definitely in those times, man. And you want to stay prayed up because it's about to get very hard. And the only way that you're going to survive these times is if you have the Spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai dealing with you. So with that, all praises, honor, and glory be unto Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Double honors to our apostles and elders at Great Millstone. Peace and love, salutations, and mercy be unto the hopeful elect. A shalom and a Bible ball. Shalom.